Well, hello, good day, Rare Elvis Photos. Another episode, another video, another chance to interact, to read some stories, to find out some information about Elvis we might not have known, to share our love of Elvis. And yeah, so I've been busy. We went on vacation. I did get some reading of Elvis and Kathy in right here, and some Child Bride. I got some reading of my Army Days with Elvis in, which we're going to continue that series. And of course, these episodes going on with Priscilla, gaslighting Riley, gaslighting her daughter Lisa, as well as the suspicion. That's not a word. Maybe I'll make it a word. The suspected idea that Riley is completely on Priscilla's side. I don't know. She's a smart woman. And yes, Priscilla was brought up on stage or allowed to come on stage in Memphis. But then at the same time, she also was not even mentioned in Nashville when I was there. And not only was she not mentioned, but in the book, From Here to the Great Unknown, ain't nothing good about Priscilla in there. But yeah, before I get to reading here some Elvis and Kathy, and then maybe later on the day we're going to do some From Here to the Great Unknown, I got this new book in. Now, I don't know whether or not, I'm going to have to talk to Johnny, whether Johnny knows this fella, William J. Taylor. But it's a book I hadn't seen before. The King of Rock and Roll was seen by an officer who served with him. Has anybody heard of William J. Taylor? Hal Durham, the president of the Grand Ole Opry, says, reading about Elvis Presley's service to the United States Army, one has to realize what a remarkable young man he was. As Bill Taylor makes clear, Elvis was a good soldier who served his time with distinction, a well-told account of an important segment of the life of an American legend. You got former Secretary of Defense Thomas H. Moore. Elvis in the Army is about a special relationship between a young professional officer, Bill Taylor, and a young enlisted man named Elvis Presley, who typified the best in a peacetime conscripted armed force. He provides a fascinating perspective on Specialist Presley, as is informative, captivating reading. And then you got former Chief of Staff, U.S. Army. Gotta love this. These are big people in the military talking about Elvis. And that's, we're going to start reading that at some point in time, too. An army is made up of soldiers, all kind of soldiers, some famous, some not famous. Elvis in the Army is a first-hand story about one of those soldiers. Elvis Aaron Presley, who, when called, served his country well. Bill Taylor tells us what Elvis Presley was really like and vividly describes his army during the dramatic days of the Cold War. A good read. So, Cold War. So this is more. Looks like that might be Bill Taylor right there. I bet you that's him. He's probably sitting around the fire. Regardless, we know a lot of the funny stuff and the nice stuff and the kind stuff away from the military while he was there with Johnny and some funny stories. I'm curious to see what's in this book. Hey, sir, I got a complaint about the chow, Elvis said to Cochran. What the hell's wrong with the chow? It's state of GI issue, the world's best chow for the world's best soldiers, replied Cochran with a big grin on his face. Elvis was smiling. Well, there isn't enough peanut butter in those little sea rations. And when we get hot chow, the cooks serve limp bacon. I can't make decent sandwiches. Anyways, looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to bringing it to y'all. Oh, no, this was my bookmark, but I know where I left off here. I think it was page 111. Right? No, it wasn't. Well, I'll be back. I'm going to hit the pause button and come back with the right page for Elvis and Kathy. Gee. All right, so I was close. It was page 121, 120. I had left my bookmark, not a very pretty one. It's a baseball card, Elvis card holder. So let's get started. So where we left off, Kathy was the victim of some stalkers, kind of like Priscilla. They did catch the man that was hiding in the dressing room that ran out. So here, not all of my experiences were that traumatic. Vernon, Elvis's father, met me in the elevator one time and told me there was a lady running up and down the hotel hallway calling, Kathy, Kathy, they're going to get you with the microwaves. When she spotted Vernon, she told him to be sure to warn me. On another occasion, I walked into my room and there was this man, a woman, and 2 children waiting for me. The man was wearing a holstered gun. Kathy, at last you're back, said this woman who had never set eyes on my life. Who are you? I asked. We just wanted to see and talk to you, she replied. Well, how'd you get in my room? A fair question under the circumstances. We just told the clerk downstairs that I was your sister, and you were expecting us, she answered in a voice that revealed her pride over her own resourcefulness. Well, you can just leave, the bodyguard with me said angrily. I was more upset with the stupid clerk at the desk than I was with my family, or with the family. Without too much fuss, the bodyguard got them out of the way and away from me. Then he went down to the hotel management and had a few choice words with them about the security for all of us working in the show. Once in Chicago, Randy Cullors, who was a new drummer for one of the groups of the show, and I decided to go shopping. When we stepped outside the hotel, a bad dust storm greeted us. Two girls, who we found out later had been camping in the parking lot of the arena for 4 days to get tickets, asked where we were going, and I told them that we wanted to find the nearest shopping mall, but the dust storm made the trip unlikely. They offered to take us to their car, and we accepted. Ronnie and I shopped for a while, and the girls waited for us. When we finished shopping, and they were driving us back to the hotel, one of them said, I would give anything to have a scarf from Elvis. Well, at that time, as part of his act, Elvis would take a scarf he was wearing and wrap it around some fans' shoulders, and the crowd would go wild. The girls had probably seen the show and knew Elvis had given me one during the Hawaiian wedding song number. He also gave scarves away indiscriminately to the audience, and always had dozens stashed away. Not knowing how it would affect the girls, I said, well, maybe I can get you a scarf. You made it! One girl screeched, and then they both began to scream with such force, which in no way can I imitate. I can't get that high. I would ruin my voice. But I can hear it. They had to take deep breaths before letting out another scream. The car began weaving, and the girl driving was so excited she lost control, and they went right off the road. Randy jumped up, leaning over the seat, and grabbed the wheel, saving us from hitting the center divider of the highway. On top of the hair-raising ride, the driver got lost and could not find her way back to our hotel. It took us 1.5 hours before we made it back, and I was late for the show bus. I nearly got us all killed, and all I was trying to do was repay the girls for giving us a ride to the shopping mall. Now I wonder, did they get that scarf, or did they not? They probably didn't get the scarf. I would love to ask Kathy, because they were late for the show bus. And maybe she didn't even have a chance to. Another night, Myrna Smith of the Sweet Inspirations was in my room, and we were chatting and relaxing, but the hour was getting late, so Myrna said goodnight and left. A few seconds later, there was a light rap on my door and a soft whispering. Kathy. I thought it was Myrna, returning because she had forgotten to tell me something, so I went to the door and opened it without a thought. It wasn't Myrna. It was a woman dressed in leopard skin pants, leopard skin pants, ultra high heels with a wild haircut, looking just like Cher when she did that wild lady skit on television. Her hair looked as if it had been charged by electricity. She wore heavy makeup and her lips were painted a bright red. She pounced into my room and caught me so off guard that she knocked me down as she cried, Kathy, I've got to talk to you. I couldn't get my breath out. I was so frightened I couldn't scream. Out of nowhere came a security guard and pulled her off me and dragged her away. Then Jackie Kahane called to see if I was all right. It seems the leopard lady had knocked on his door by mistake and said she was looking for Kathy. Well, Jackie shut his door and called security right away, and that's how they got there so soon. I have no idea what the woman wanted or where she came from or what she would have done if she hadn't made the mistake of knocking on Jackie's door first. I never did get used to the crowds that gathered when we were trying to get from one place to another. People would grab at my clothing, all wanting a piece of something I was wearing. I've had people come up to me real friendly-like, a smile on their face, asking to shake my hand, and when I put my hand on theirs, they would try to pull the ring right off my finger. Just like they did to Elvis, you know. So Elvis taught me to wear tape onto the rings so people couldn't pull them off as easily. But it hurts when someone's determined to get a ring off your finger. And if you resist, they don't give up, even if it means taking your finger with the ring. This, incidentally, has happened more frequently these past few years since Elvis's passing. Of course, they might think that maybe it's a ring that Elvis gave her. One night I was in the lobby of a hotel near the elevators. A drunken couple was standing there when suddenly the man grabbed me and tried to haul me off to his room. The woman just stood there laughing, egging him on. He held on to me because I couldn't get free, and I became frightened because I knew this man was determined that I was going with him. Luckily, Red West was just getting off the elevator and saw I was in trouble. He pulled the man off, and when I got to my room, I locked the door behind me. Just another close call. I'm wondering if that episode with Red West is an episode where maybe he beat the heck out of the guy. One of those lawsuits. We just don't know some of these background stories that caused the Memphis Mafia, Red and Sonny and I believe, I don't want to mention the other guy, Dave Hebler. Two, because it wasn't somebody that Elvis liked. He never said anything positive that I saw about Dave Hebler. He loved Red and he loved Sonny. But I wonder if that's one of those episodes where lawsuits were brought against him because of that. I've learned a few things over the years about protecting myself. I refuse to go into a hotel room without a man checking our room first. I never stand behind a table signing autographs with my back against the wall. I have to have some means of escape because the people in line keep inching closer and closer until they have you squashed against the wall. While Elvis and I stopped going to public places in the hotel, like the coffee shop or dining room, there was simply no peace. That's no way to enjoy a meal because someone was constantly interrupting. They were either begging you to introduce themselves to Elvis or wanting to audition right there. Or they wanted an autograph. Doing a show with Elvis meant room service or no food at all. I remember people kneeling in front of me, crying and begging to touch my right hand because on stage, Elvis had touched that hand as he introduced me. This is the phenomenon of Priscilla. This is why there's so many ladies that like Priscilla and want to talk to Priscilla and meet Priscilla and touch Priscilla. Because Priscilla, had touched that hand as he introduced me. Priscilla, did a lot of things with Elvis. And I think that they think if they touch Priscilla, then they have, in a sense, touched Elvis. I totally reject idol worship. It is simply not acceptable to me in a religious or intellectual way. However, I understand that these people loved Elvis so much that they just wanted to be near something that was near him. It gave me an odd feeling because to have someone wanting to touch me because I touched someone else, it's very odd. One of the most annoying things that happened frequently was fire alarms going off in the hotels where we were staying. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, the fire alarm would go off, and at first I would dash from my room like any normal person would do, but it was usually a false alarm. Some fans, believing that they were being clever, would set it off thinking Elvis would have to come out. They were surprised to find all the other hotel guests rushing to the exits, but nobody from the show. We were all jaded, and fire alarms meant another clever trick to us. After all, we were the same folks who survived an average of 4 bomb threats a day in Las Vegas and on the road. However, I remember one night in Vegas, waiting in Elvis's suite, and the fire alarm began to ring, and I ignored it completely as usual. I waited and waited, but nobody else showed up in the suite. That's when I found out there really had been a fire on the 30th floor, the same floor that I was on. I was thinking that kind of behavior, eventually, there needed to be some person that checked it out that wasn't Elvis to make sure that there wasn't a fire, because gosh, wouldn't that have been horrible? Some fans can be tireless and relentless. No matter how many times I told the telephone operator that I was resting and didn't want to be disturbed, the telephone would always ring because the operator had either ignored my request, or perhaps there had been a change of shifts and a new operator was on, or a fan with a very glib tongue and active imagination convinced the operator that their call was truly a matter of life and death. I actually had to fight the urge to pull the phone right out of the wall sometimes. I wasn't the only one who felt that way. One night, in total frustration, J.D. Sumner did his phone out of the wall and said it made him feel terrific. That's what I would do. I would be taking the phone off the hook and then wrapping a towel around it because it makes that beep, 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 beep. That's probably why she didn't do it. Or just unplug it. But then if Elvis called, that's probably why she kept it on there. Maybe the wake-up calls back in those days for people sleeping was that as well. It was alarms from the phone. Of course, in most big cities, Elvis had extra security because of his entourage of bodyguards. They were locals, many of them off-duty policemen, and they were assigned to watch us and to control the crowds. Most of them were wonderful and quick acting. However, some of them were worse than the people that were supposed to keep them at bay. They wanted autographs and souvenirs. I know one bodyguard who was supposed to be bodyguarding me took my silver belt while I was on stage. A lot of the security men would just stand around watching us get ready or would find a good vantage point to see the show, completely disinterested in what was happening in the audience or backstage. Many times Elvis's bodyguards just weren't enough to handle the crowds, but the security people that were hired to help them did not make me feel any more confident or secure than I would have if the proverbial fox was guarding the henhouse. Now, between tours, the one refuge I had was my home located in rural Southern California. It was a refuge until Elvis made the mistake of introducing our own little Kathy Westmoreland, the little girl with the big voice from blah, 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 California. When that moment came on, until this very day, my refuge became the scene of some bizarre happenings, some of them hard to believe. One early morning, a woman appeared at my home. I was in Las Vegas working on my first 2 weeks with Elvis, so it was 1970. But my mother and father were there. Now, I want to point out that my home was in an area where I can have horses and other animals, which I love. It's off the beaten path, and people do not get there by accident. When the woman came to the door at 7:30 a.m., my father answered, and she asked for me. Do you have stable space for rent? My father said we didn't, but the woman seemed pleasant enough, and you must remember that my parents at this time were not aware, nor was I, that some fans can be pushy. Well, the middle-aged woman looked ordinary enough, but maybe a little flashy, but quite pleasant. I'm sorry I miss Kathy, said the woman. I'm a good friend of hers. My parents said they were sorry too, and before they knew it, they were engaged in a conversation about me and the Elvis show. She had just left Las Vegas, she had told them, and the show was wonderful. I had a wonderful voice and was such a nice person. On and on she went. She asked if she could come in, and since she was obviously somebody I knew, they thought, they agreed. She kept talking and talking, pewing here and there, trying to see everything. Where does Elvis sleep? Well, Elvis doesn't sleep here. He's never been here, replied my sweet, hospitable mother, who by now wondered who the woman was, because any friend of mine would have known that Elvis didn't visit my home in California, and never had. Finally, after an indeterminable length of time, the woman left, got in her car, and drove away. That afternoon, all of the electricity went off. After trying to fuse boxes and obvious things, my father gave up and started calling the utility companies. Something strange here, he said. All my lights went off, there's no electricity, and no reason why it should be off. Is there trouble on the line? No, the light company said. Has the bill been paid? Well, of course the bill's been paid, my father said with growing irritation. The light company checked and came back to phone. Well, according to our records, a Mrs. Peterson came in this morning, said you were moving, and wanted all the utilities, gas, water, electricity changed into her name. We aren't moving. There's some mistake, protested my father. At first, both my parents were shocked. Who would do such a thing? The clerk came back and said, well, our clerk who handled the order said a woman came in and she was moving in at your address, he said. Turn the power back on. That's not true, said my puzzled father. After further investigation, the woman who had professed to be my friend and who was so pushy was the same one who had the utilities turned off. My poor father, new to the world of off-the-deep-end Elvis fanatics, called me in Las Vegas outraged. How stupid of you to send this friend of yours to our home. What kind of wacko friends do you have anyways? Of course, I had no idea who this person was. She had to be living in some kind of fantasy, believing she was moving in with my family and myself. It turned out that she had seen the show in Las Vegas, had heard Elvis say where I lived, found the house, and talked her way in. At first, it was hard for me to believe that anyone would go to such great extremes, but later I learned that this type of thing is very common. Several years later, the same woman, my father believes it was the same woman, and my mother isn't certain, showed up at my home once again. She was wearing flashy dice earrings. They must have contained batteries. And my parents, for some reason, let her in, or she may have pushed her way into the living room. My parents still haven't learned how to be rude. Anyway, I was in my bedroom ready to go to sleep when I heard her talking, and nightgown and all, I climbed out the window, waded through the duck pond, and headed for my neighbor's house. Geez, Kathy, you left your pants there? So Kathy just ditches her parents with this psycho woman, climbs out the window, wades across a duck pond, and headed for the neighbors. Nancy, my next door neighbor, wasn't home, so I headed further down the street. I knocked on their door barefoot and in nightclothes, but I didn't care. I had to escape. May I stay here for just a moment? They said I could, and I sat there in the living room, trembling with anger and emotion. I began to cry, and they comforted me. It was all just too much. Hounding me at the only refuge left to me, the privacy of my own home. Finally, the woman left, and I went home, angry and resentful and ready to explode in my frustration. I vowed the next time that the crazy lady got near me, I was going to call the police. And the police were no strangers to our house because of threats and unwelcome people trying to get into our house. I was so emotionally on edge that I probably needed professional therapy at that point. Now, one man kept calling me. He would call me from all sorts of places. Hello, it's me again, Market. Probably that guy. He was a salesman and was on the road a lot, but no matter where I was, he would call. Another man was frequently in the audience, and he also watched me silently off stage in many different cities. He would be standing in the corner of a hotel lobby, at hotel doors, in crowds of fans. He never said a word, but I knew he was there. Myrna noticed his vigil and often alerted me. There he is again, Kathy. Then one day he called my home and said to my father, "Tell Kathy to come and pick me up at the airport." This man was a total stranger, had never said a word to me in person, just spoke to me on the phone, and now he wanted me to pick him up at the airport. He showed up at my house, and my father called the police and went to the door with a baseball bat. Hey, about time. He chased the man away, and the police arrived. I've got no idea who this dangerous man was, or how dangerous he was, or if he was just on some kind of fantasy trip. He obviously must have never came back. There was one man who called every time there was a full moon. So, he would call in the middle of the night, sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning, and ask, "Is Elvis there?" Once in Vegas, a group from Van Nuys came to see the show. Van Nuys is a 2-hour drive from my home, and there was an acquaintance of mine who knew a man in the group. So I'm wondering, so Van Nuys, now I don't want to blow up where she lives, and we probably know where she lives now, but 2 hours from Van Nuys is where I lived, out there in the desert of California. So I wonder if she was actually out there in that area. But she had to go to Ontario. She had to fly into Ontario, or out of Ontario to Palm Springs to meet Elvis. So I don't know. Interesting. So Van Nuys is a 2-hour drive to my home, and there was an acquaintance of mine who knew a man in the group, so she introduced us. It was all very casual, and I forgot about it. Months later, a man kept driving past my house, and he looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. He kept going back and forth, and exasperated, I went to talk to him. It was an impulsive and foolish act, but I wanted to find out who he was. It was then I noticed a number of handguns, rifles, and ammunition lying on the front seat of his car. I ran inside and called the police and told them that this man had an arsenal in his car. Well, it turned out he was the man who had met me in Vegas and had decided he was going to protect Kathy, a self-appointed vigilante. Later, I heard he had gone berserk and shot his wife. Oh my gosh. He went to prison, but I think he's out now and still living in Southern California. I don't know any more than that, but obviously the man was an emotionally unbalanced man at the time. At one point, I was flying on commercial airlines from Los Angeles to Graceland in Memphis. Huh. So she flew to Graceland. Didn't know that. Interesting. So, I wonder what year that was. Probably, obviously, somebody had to be before Linda Thompson and after Priscilla was gone. I kept noticing that this one lady who was on every plane I was on. Later, I heard from some of the band members that she had told them that she was after me and wanted to have a lesbian relationship with me. Kathy Lou, she wants you, they joked. I had to take some embarrassing kidding, as you can imagine, from the boys in the band. I've got no idea how she would have known what flights I would be on, but she did. And then she just stopped appearing wherever I looked, and one of my friends teased me, saying she'd obviously fallen in love with somebody else. Well, just recently a woman called me and said she looked a lot like Priscilla and wanted to meet Kathy. My mother said Kathy doesn't live here anymore. The girl said she knew I did, and that she wasn't like all the others, and she just wanted to take time to talk to me for a few minutes. Most of them believe that they aren't just like the others, but of course they are. Another person who even calls regularly today says the same. I'm not like all the others, I just like the man, which is Elvis, and I want to talk to you about the man. I had to call the police more times than I want to remember, but I can never thank them enough for all of their understanding and patience. They used to patrol down my street every hour because people would go through my mailbox, steal my mail, and try to steal the car. Someone even wanted to steal the seats from my car. One woman wanted to beat me up because her boyfriend had a crush on me, and I didn't even know who he was. Since Elvis's death, I've often traveled around the country at the request of Elvis Presley fan clubs. Yeah, I know, Kathy. So, I mean, this is interesting. I get where she's coming from, but at the same time, can't have it both ways. You got to have protection. Your personal space has got to be valued and protected, obviously. But, here she is traveling around at the request of Elvis Presley fan clubs. So, on one hand, the things that are driving you crazy, and in a sense putting you in danger at times, are the same things that are feeding your family. On one occasion, I was asked by a fan club in Hickory, North Carolina, to sign autographs in a car lot for 3 days as part of a charitable fundraiser. Many of the fan clubs are involved in community charities. Wayne Taylor, the husband of the original Kathy Westmoreland fan club president located in my hometown, was with me most of the time. During one of these 3 days, I sensed something was wrong because many of the people in charge seemed strange, nervous, and they wouldn't let me come out from behind the table where I was signing autographs. They moved my table so that it was located far back in the showroom corner. I knew something was up, but I didn't know what. I found out later that a man had called and said, Kathy Westmoreland will be sorry. By the end of this day, she will be dead. They didn't tell me until later. A man was arrested and he was carrying a gun. Well, Wayne noticed the guy on the fringe of a crowd acting differently from the rest of the people. Wayne knew to look for those that were acting differently from others. Whether this was the same man who had called is another question. There was another time in Las Vegas also in which a man called my room and said, "Kathy, this is John Roberts over at the Hilton. Tell your boss tonight I'm going to blow his brains out." People who make those kind of calls usually don't follow through with their threats, but there are some who do, and you never know which one it might be. Another time, I got the nicest letter saying, "It was so great of you to stay in the parking lot for 6 hours, signing autographs, and we wanted to thank you for being so kind." The letter was from Baltimore, Maryland. Well, I hadn't been in Baltimore during that time. I was in New York. Well, once again, Kathy, these people probably lived in Baltimore and drove over to New York, which is not that far. Some parts of the books I'm really loving, and some parts, and I want to know what you guys think too. I mean, I know you're enjoying it. I think Kathy's a sweet woman, but I think sometimes she's finding some stuff to fill this book when she needs to be talking more about Elvis a little bit. In my opinion, it is called Elvis and Kathy. Now, I know that this kind of relates to Elvis, too, because he had to deal with this to a much bigger extent. Somebody stood outside the parking lot. Okay, so, yeah, somebody stood outside in the parking lot signing autographs for 6 hours, but that somebody sure wasn't me. But I knew there was at least one Kathy Westmoreland imitator out there somewhere. I doubt it, Kathy. Boring music, right? No, it was more than like, come on. Baltimore and New York are right near each other, and I know this because I ran marketing tours, and I think it's about 3 hours. And that's 3-4 hours, and that's where somebody would drive down and see you, and then she wrote a nice letter. That's all it was, I think. As I'm writing this, I'm finding out that there is more than one Kathy Westmoreland imitator. I received a telephone call from a friend who told me about an incident in the Duarte nightclub just the other night. Duarte is a small town not too far from where I live, and 2 women visited one of the nightclubs there and introduced herself as Kathy Westmoreland's manager. The management and musicians were delighted to see her because, lo and behold, the manager had Kathy Westmoreland with her. During the band's performance, they stopped and introduced, "Someone I know you will all be anxious to meet, the woman who sang for so many years with Elvis Presley, Kathy Westmoreland." During the band's performance, they stopped and introduced, "Someone I know..." Oh, I just said that, I'm sorry. The woman stood up and received a long standing ovation from the audience. "Sing for us," the audience begged. This woman, who I was told weighed in at about 185 pounds or more, shook her head shyly as she blew kisses to her appreciative audience. "I am so sorry. I cannot sing for you. Unfortunately, I was in a terrible automobile accident and my vocal cords were cut." The audience groaned in sympathy, and the heavyweight Kathy Westmoreland sat down, and groups clustered around her table for autographs, which she signed willingly. "You don't look like the same as when I heard you sing at a country western club recently. That Kathy Westmoreland was much smaller," said one suspicious fan. "Where was that?" said the imitator. The fan named the club. The imitator then turned to her manager and said, "That little twerp is imitating me again." Now I have to add that I might be a little twerp because I'm 5'1.5" and my weight never got up to 185. I would surely be dead. I'm a very slight and short, and that woman was huge. So there are 2 sad things about this incident. One of the musicians at the club received a promise from the phony Kathy Westmoreland that she would help him with his music at a recording studio. The musician was thrilled, I understand. Well, it is obvious that he'll never receive any help from her. Hopefully, Kathy, I hope you helped him, if he was any good and really deserved that help. Secondly, well, even if he wasn't, just because, well, once again, that's what I would do if I would heard something about that, and hopefully Kathy did. Secondly, those who saw the incident tell me that they think that the manager truly believes she is handling the real Kathy Westmoreland, which she most certainly is not. It is most annoying, but I must now get my attorney to find this imposter, warn her not to do it again, or I will turn her over to the police. But that isn't what bothers me most. I keep wondering what she is saying and doing while she's using my name. A pathological liar like this woman can be capable of saying or doing anything. But my problems are small compared to the number of look-alike imitators that Elvis had. They would go to strange towns and be Elvis, doing things that Elvis would have never done. He had a long list of imitators, and they are difficult to stop. By the time you have heard about them, they've moved on to another place or another town. They are slippery and destructive. I only wish I knew why they do it. Perhaps they have a powerful drive for attention, but they haven't the talent to go after, But they haven't the talent to go with the attention after they get it, so they usually find an excuse not to perform, or it would blow their cover. Impersonating celebrities is as old as time itself, but if you're the one being imitated, it is most uncomfortable being part of a very sick joke. After Elvis's death, many Elvis impersonators came on the scene and have actually established a following, difficult as it is to believe. Kathy, I don't really know why that would be difficult. There are some great people that keep his memory alive, and that, no, nobody sounds just like Elvis. I mean, I know there's a lot of these guys like Bill Cherry and stuff like that. I mean, there's nobody that sounds, there's a guy that talked like Elvis that was on maybe Geraldo Rivera. Amazing. There's a couple people that talk-wise just sound, and it's hard to fool me. It's hard. I listen for nuances, breaks in his speech. I don't try to be exactly like Elvis. I've just when I talk about it, I'll just recapture a little bit of the feeling and emotion of his speaking. But there's a reason why, Kathy, people want to not believe he's gone. They want to live for a moment in a world where Elvis didn't pass away. Very easy to understand, so I got to disagree with her on that side of it. But for the people that were going to different towns and doing things negative towards Elvis, those guys need to be stopped. They needed to be stopped, and if they still do it, well, obviously there's nobody trying to pretend to be Elvis nowadays, for the most part, because Elvis, would have been 65, 90, 89, I guess, right now. So there's not much appeal for an 89-year-old man to walk around saying he's Elvis. Back in the day, though, I can see people trying to take advantage of his name and his likeness. But even then, I mean, how many people really truly looked enough like Elvis to fool any real fan? I don't think anybody. Which reminds me that in 1973, I started having a recurring dream. In my dream, I was backing up a man pretending to be Elvis. Colonel Parker was standing off the stage left. I was trying to scream to the audience, "This isn't Elvis. This is not the real Elvis. This is a pretender." That's a dream, okay? For a second, I got stuck in it. The Colonel was furious because he wanted everyone to believe that this was the real Elvis. In fact, to my knowledge, the Colonel has never had anything to do with Elvis imitators. But it was a particularly vivid dream, and the ironic thing is, at the time, I had no idea that Elvis imitators even existed. It was a prophetic dream, and I wasn't even aware of it. That's something to talk about for a second. I know Colonel Parker gets a bad rap, and I think he definitely deserves it in a lot of ways. But couldn't Parker have gone and made a bunch of money with somebody like Orion, or those people that were pretending to be Elvis back after Elvis passed away? I really think that Parker knew Elvis was special. First off, nobody liked him. I think he had a love for Elvis. I think he had a love for what he did. And it's telling to me that I don't believe Parker tried to be a manager after Elvis, and especially after getting sued by the estate. Even Priscilla was, once again, Priscilla defending Parker means that Parker must not have been very good. But just interesting. She has this dream. But wouldn't you think Colonel Parker would have backed up an Elvis imitator or used his power to manage another artist? No. There was no other Elvis. There was no reason to. It'd be like dating the love of your life and then finding somebody that you can barely stand to look at, talk to, and pretend that it's the love of your life. I think that's probably how Colonel Parker thought about that. In fact, to my knowledge, Colonel K has never had a kid. In the entertainment industry, stars are vulnerable to many schemes by unscrupulous people. One of the most common is a mother trying to arrange a meeting for her daughter with a famous male personality. Supposedly, this is for the purpose of inspiring the young lady and offering encouragement to continue pursuing a show business career. The mother and daughter loiter in hotel lobbies and try everything to get backstage and generally hound anyone they feel could get them to the star. Well, Elvis was always aware of this kind of setup and never had a problem, but he told me how the mothers would offer their underage daughters, who are usually dressed and groomed to look older, to a headliner, and if any kind of involvement takes place, the unsuspecting performer is usually hit with a lawsuit because he took advantage of a minor. In addition, there are always groupies waiting for one-night stands and an occasional nymphomaniac who sometimes entertains scores of men in a hotel room while her husband and children wait patiently in the lobby for her return. Woo! There's some details there, Kathy. Oh my goodness. Good Lord, I'm blushing. All right. On stage, Elvis was in his element, but sometimes it was too much for even him. One night, his legs and hands shaking deliberately, I don't think it was deliberately. I think it was shaking because he was the way he was feeling. I heard him say to Vernon, "Daddy, it takes a lot of nerve to go out there." And most times he did. Imagine facing thousands and thousands of screaming fans who expected you to deliver your very best. But in front of you were bodyguards, sometimes special police officers holding machine guns and billy clubs with the specter of death threat looming over your head. At any moment, someone could pull a gun out and end the singing, the caring, the loving you were giving to every being out there in the audience. Imagine being just one gunshot away from oblivion, many, many times, and still performing as if you hadn't a care in the world. In Chicago, a man phoned and said he was going to shoot Elvis. We were told to hit the floor if we heard any shot or if anyone made a move. Vernon was real nervous that day, pacing back and forth, the strain showing on his face. In the middle of the performance, the guy who made the call lit an M80 firecracker and started to throw it at Elvis. Red West saw him and jumped him in time, so the firecracker exploded in the guy's hand while Red clobbered him. When it happened, Elvis stopped the show, grabbed his chest, and cried, "Oh my God, I've been shot!" Vernon jumped up on the stage crying, "Elvis, Elvis!" He was certain his son was dying. Then Elvis grinned up at him and burst out laughing. We were all, needless to say, relieved, but we were shook up about it for days. That's a good place to stop this reading here, and talk about what we heard. We heard about all of the, in a sense, crazy people that Kathy had to deal with, that Elvis had to deal with. His fans who loved Elvis would never do that, but there were fans that were a little bit unstable. They felt that they loved Elvis, and they wanted to be close to him and do whatever it could to get a piece of him, to rip rings off of his fingers, to meet him, to bring their daughters and offer them so they could actually get a piece of Elvis financially or some other way. Oh, you did this with my daughter, now guess what? I'm going to tell if you don't spend the night with me. I mean, there's all sorts of things. And me being an artist, and my wife can attest to this. I mean, I had hundreds of thousands of girls throwing themselves at me throughout the years. When I was on stage, when I was off the stage, when I was with my wife. It's a bit of a culture, and there's when people are excited about you and there's a frenzy about you and they think you're famous or they think you're gonna be famous or you are famous, it opens up a whole different can of worms for what you got to deal with. Wonder if, let's see what other pictures are in here as we wrap this video up. And of course, if you made it to the end of the video, let me know, and I will be doing another comment video a little bit later on. Here's some more pictures. There's Kathy singing. Welcome, Kathy Westmoreland. It's Tupelo. Badge presented to me on Elvis's birthday in '78. There's a lot of pictures of Kathy in here. Visiting Graceland after my performance at the International Elvis Tribute Concert Week. So, Kathy went on this whole imitator thing she talked about in that chapter. She went on and she performed at the Elvis International Tribute Week. So, and of course, tribute and impersonators go hand in hand in a lot of ways. Former Snow White parading at the Disneyland's 50th anniversary. So, great pictures, the boy and the man. All right, well, we'll continue our reading. If you haven't read the Child Bride series, I've got a podcast on my playlist. Just tap on Rare of his photos after this and go start reading along with me with the Child Bride. I'm going to start doing this. I've already read a couple sections of it. I got Mommy Days with Elvis, and then this new book that came to go with all the other books that I've got, including The Faith of Elvis, a story only a brother can tell. I've got that. Billy Stanley. I've got a lot of books now. I used to not have as many books, but not as many as some of y'all who I've heard have upwards of 400. That's right. All right, TCB TLC. This is Rare of his photos. Let's keep it real. Let's keep defending Elvis, defending Lisa Marie, and standing up to the lies that are out there.